My daughter-in-law hosted a New Year's party. She invited everyone except me. I did not learn this from a conversation or a mistake. I learned it from the family group chat lighting up my phone while my name stayed unmentioned. Photos came first. A decorated hall, long tables, glassware lined up with care. Then messages followed, one after another, about dresses, arrival times, who would bring dessert, who would stay past midnight. I read them quietly, waiting for a private message that never came. At first, I told myself it was coming later. These things happen. People get busy. My name is Marianne Holloway. I am 58. I have been part of this family for years. Long enough to know how these plans usually unfold. Long enough to notice when something is missing. As the evening went on, the silence became harder to ignore. No one asked what I was wearing. No one checked whether I could make it. The conversation moved forward as if my place had already been decided. When my son came home that night, I tried to keep my voice light. I asked if he had heard anything more about the party. I said it casually, the way you do when you do not want to sound uncertain. He paused before answering. Not long, just long enough. That pause told me more than his words did. He sat down across from me and said he had asked his wife earlier that day. He said she had an explanation. The party, according to her, was only for real family. He said it carefully, as if the wording itself might bruise. I listened without interrupting. I nodded once. I did not argue. I did not ask him to repeat it. Something had shifted, and I understood that the invitation was not late. It was never coming. My son didn't speak right away. He sat across from me, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the space between us. I had seen that posture before. It was the one he used when he was about to say something he wished he didn't have to. I asked her. He said finally, I didn't want to, but I did. I nodded, and he exhaled slowly. She said the party is different this year, different how I asked. He looked up then, and his face gave him away before his words did. She said it's only for real family. The phrase landed hard, even though it was quiet in the room. Real family, I repeated, more to myself than to him. I told her that wasn't fair. He said quickly, I said, you're my family. You're my mother. And what did she say to that? He hesitated. She said she gets to decide who belongs at her events. That it's her home. Her celebration. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not sharp enough to hurt. Just enough to remind me to stay still. So everyone else was invited. I said, and I wasn't. He nodded once. Yes. He reached for my hand. I don't want to go without you. I can tell her I'm not coming. I pulled my hand back gently. No, I said. Don't do that, Mom. This isn't about choosing sides, I said, and it isn't about making a point. He looked relieved and guilty at the same time. I'm sorry, he said. I should have pushed harder. I shook my head. You asked. That matters. But inside, something settled into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision made clearly enough to be defended. He sat there waiting for me to react, to protest, to demand space at a table that had already been set without me. I didn't give him any of that. I told him I understood. I told him to go if he wanted. My voice stayed even, practiced from years of smoothing moments like this. After he went to bed, I stayed up alone, replaying the words I hadn't said. Only for real family. I had never realized before how easily a line could be drawn and how quietly it could erase you. The next morning, my son called before work. I didn't sleep much. He said, neither did I. I answered. There was a pause. Then he added, she didn't mean it the way it sounded. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I know how it sounded. I said, I also know how it was meant. He didn't argue. That told me enough. Over the years, there had been moments like this. Not loud ones, quiet ones. The kind that slip past unless you stop and look back. Holidays where the menu changed after I offered to help. Birthdays where plans shifted and no one thought to tell me. Comments made lightly, always followed by laughter, as if humor could soften anything. At one Thanksgiving, my daughter-in-law had said, "You don't have to come early. We've got everything handled. I was just trying to help." I'd said, "I know," she replied. "We'd just like to keep things simple." So I arrived later. I brought nothing. I stayed out of the kitchen. Another time, during a family dinner, she'd looked at the table and said, "We're trying something more modern this year. Less traditional." My son glanced at me, waiting to see if I'd react. "That's fine," I said. "Change can be good." Each time, I chose the smoother path. I told myself it was maturity. I told myself it was love. I didn't want my son to feel torn between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. Once, after a small disagreement about Christmas plans, he'd said, "You're always so understanding, Mom." I remember answering, "That's because some things aren't worth fighting over." What I didn't say was how often I adjusted without being asked. How often I stepped back before anyone needed to push. I made myself smaller, so the space would feel less crowded for everyone else. That morning, I replayed those conversations in my head, not with anger, but with clarity. The party wasn't the first time I'd been quietly edged aside. It was just the first time the line had been spoken out loud. Only for real family. I realized then that I had helped make that sentence possible, not by agreeing with it, but by teaching them I would accept less without complaint. By the time my coffee went cold, something inside me had shifted. I still cared about keeping peace. I still loved my son, but I no longer wanted that peace to come at the cost of my own place. I wasn't angry yet. I was simply done pretending this moment had appeared out of nowhere. That evening, my son stood in the doorway of the kitchen longer than usual, as if he was weighing how much of the truth I could carry. "I've been thinking," he said. "I don't have to go." I set down the cup I was holding. "Go where to the party?" he said. "I can tell her I'm staying home with you." "No," I said immediately. He frowned. "Mom, you don't have to protect me. I'm not." I said, "I'm being clear." He stepped closer. "She was wrong. She knows it. If I don't go, maybe she'll understand that." I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defiant. He was trying to fix something that felt broken in both directions. "This isn't a test," I said. "And it's not a punishment. If you don't go, it won't change what she decided. So I'm just supposed to go and pretend nothing happened." "I didn't say that," I replied. "You asked. You were honest with me. That matters. What happens next is yours." He ran a hand through his hair. "It feels wrong to celebrate without you. It would feel wrong for me to make you stay." I said, "I won't do that." There was a long silence between us. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I am." What I didn't say was everything else. I didn't tell him how easy it would be to ask him to choose me. I didn't tell him how tempting it was to call his wife myself and demand an explanation. I didn't tell him how many words I had rehearsed in my head and then set aside. I had spent years smoothing edges, filling gaps, explaining myself before anyone asked. I wasn't going to do that now. If there was a place for me at that table, it would have been offered without conditions. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I'll go for a little while, then I'll come back." "That's fine," I told him. After he left the room, I stood there alone, feeling the ache settle and then loosen. I hadn't argued. I hadn't begged. I hadn't explained myself into something smaller. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was deciding what came next. The email was still sitting in my inbox when I opened my laptop that night. I hadn't deleted it, but I hadn't answered it either. New Year's gala invitation. It had arrived weeks earlier from the community foundation I'd worked with for years, back when they needed help reshaping their outreach. I remembered reading it and thinking, that sounds lovely. Before closing the message and telling myself I'd be busy with family, I opened it again. The sender was Lydia Chen, the foundation's director. She had been careful with words, always respectful of time. We'd be honored if you'd join us as our guest this year. She had written, your work helped us reach families we never could before. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. I could still say no. That was my habit. I could stay home, keep the night small, quiet, manageable, no explanations required. My phone rang before I decided. It was my son. I just wanted to check on you. He said, you okay, I am, I said, and realized it was true. I'll come back early, he added. I don't like the idea of you being alone. I won't be, I said. There was a pause. What do you mean I was invited to a charity event? I said, I think I'm going to go. He sounded surprised, then relieved. That sounds good, Mom. Really good. After we hung up, I wrote back to Lydia. Thank you for thinking of me. I'd be glad to attend. She responded within minutes. Wonderful. We've added you to the program. There are a few people who've been hoping to meet you. That line made me hesitate. Not because I felt unworthy, but because I wasn't used to being anticipated. Later, when I mentioned it to my son in passing, he smiled. See, he said, you're wanted somewhere. I didn't correct him, but I thought about the difference. I wasn't going where I was tolerated. I wasn't filling a seat to keep things balanced. I was going where my presence made sense. As I closed my laptop, the house felt quieter than usual, but not empty. I wasn't avoiding the party I hadn't been invited to. I was stepping towards something that had been waiting long before I needed it. I arrived early, which is something I've always done when I'm not sure where I belong. It gives you a few minutes to decide whether to stay. Lydia greeted me at the door with a quick smile. I'm glad you made it, she said. I know holidays can be complicated. They can, I said. She gestured toward the room. Let me introduce you to a few people when things settle. At first, no one noticed me. Conversations were already in motion. Names overlapping, laughter landing in places I wasn't part of. I stood with a glass of water, listening, nodding when someone brushed past. I thought about leaving. Not dramatically, just quietly. The way I've done before. Then Lydia returned with a man in a gray suit. Marianne, this is Thomas Reed, she said. He chairs the advisory board. He shook my hand. You're the reason our last campaign reached rural families, he said. We'd been trying for years. I was part of a team, I replied. He smiled. You were the part that listened. That stopped me. A woman joined us. Then another. Each conversation unfolded the same way, slowly, without flattery. They spoke about work, about choices, about what it meant to reach people without speaking down to them. At one point, Lydia leaned in and said, We'd like you to say a few words later. Nothing formal. I don't usually, I said. I know, she replied. That's why it would matter. I stepped away for a moment, steadying myself. I wasn't invisible here. I just hadn't announced myself. When I spoke, my voice didn't shake. I kept it brief. I talked about listening, about doing work that didn't need applause to be useful. The room stayed quiet until I finished. Then people nodded, not out of obligation, but recognition. As I stepped down, I realized something simple and unsettling. No one had asked who invited me. They only cared that I was there. After I stepped away from the small crowd, I checked my phone for the first time in over an hour. There was a message from my son. I'm on my way back soon. Hope you're having a good night. I typed back. I am. Take your time. Lydia appeared beside me again, holding her phone. "We should get a few photos," she said. "The board likes to document these things." "I'm not great at posing," I said. "You don't have to pose," she replied. "Just stand where you are." She took a few pictures, one with her, one with Thomas, one where I was mid-laugh, not looking at the camera at all. When she showed them to me, I barely recognized myself. I looked calm, present, not like someone waiting for permission. "Would you like me to send them to you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. After a moment, later, sitting alone at a small table, I opened the photos again. I thought about closing the app. I thought about saving them for myself and leaving the night unmarked. A familiar instinct stirred. The one that said, "Don't draw attention. Don't complicate things." Another thought followed it. Quieter, but steadier. "This is your life too." I selected 2 photos. I didn't crop them carefully. I didn't filter them. I typed a simple line. "Grateful to begin the new year with meaningful work and good people." That was all. I didn't mention the party I wasn't at. I didn't explain where I was or why. I didn't tag anyone except Lydia, because she'd asked me to. My finger hovered for a second before I posted, not out of fear, but awareness. I set the phone face down on the table and stood up. The room felt unchanged. Conversations continued. Laughter rose and fell. Whatever would come next, I had already chosen not to hide. And that choice, small as it was, felt final. I felt the vibration before I heard the sound. Once. Then again, I glanced at the screen and turned it face down. A moment later, it lit up again. Lydia noticed. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "Just family." I stepped into a quieter corner and answered on the 3rd call. "What did you think you were doing?" my daughter-in-law said. She didn't bother with my name. "I was at an event," I said. "Don't play innocent," she snapped. "Those photos. Do you have any idea how that looks?" I shared my evening. I replied. "That's all." Her voice rose. "My friends are texting me. People are asking why you're not here. They're comparing. I didn't ask anyone to do that." I said, "You knew exactly what you were doing." She said, "You wanted to make me look bad." I leaned against the wall, feeling how steady my breath was. "I didn't mention your party. I didn't mention you. I didn't even mention why I was there." "That's worse," she said. "Now everyone's imagining things." "That isn't something I can control," I said. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "You could have stayed home. You could have kept this private." I chose not to. I said. She went quiet for a beat, then said, "You don't belong in those circles." I let that sit. "I was invited." I said. "I contributed." I stood where I was welcomed. Her words came fast now, uneven. This was supposed to be my night, my family, my event, and it was. I said, "I didn't take that from you." "You embarrassed me," she said. "You made me look small." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. "If you feel embarrassed," I said, "it's because people noticed I wasn't there." She said my name then, sharp and shaking. "You did this on purpose." "I lived my life," I said, quietly. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment longer, phone still in my hand. The noise of the room drifted back in. Unchanged. Nothing had broken. Nothing had been taken from me. But something had shifted, and she felt it. I went back to where I'd been standing before. My phone silent now. My hands steady. My son picked me up just after midnight. The first thing he did was look at my face. Not my clothes. Not the building behind me. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. He nodded. But his jaw was tight. He waited until we were in the car. The party got uncomfortable. I didn't respond right away. "She saw your photos," he continued. "Everyone did. People kept asking why you weren't there." I turned toward him. "And what did she say?" At first, she said you were busy, he said. Then she said you chose something else. Then she got angry. At me, at you, he said. At the situation, at herself. Maybe. He stopped at a red light and finally looked at me. She called you, didn't she? Yes. I said she was upset. He let out a short breath. She told me you humiliated her. And what did you say? I said she excluded you. He replied. His voice was calm, but it didn't waver. I said those were her words, her choice. I felt something loosen in my chest. She told me you don't fit with our family, he went on, that you don't understand how things are supposed to be. And I told her this. He said, I said you're my mother. I said if she decides who counts as family, then she should be prepared for people to notice who's missing. I watched his hands on the steering wheel. Steady, certain. She said you embarrassed her, I said quietly. He shook his head. I told her she embarrassed herself the moment she drew that line. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Not the heavy kind, the settled kind. When we reached my house, he turned off the engine but didn't get out. I should have said something sooner. He said, I didn't want to cause problems. You didn't. I said, you named one. He nodded. Things are going to change, I know. I said, for the first time in days, I felt seen without having to explain myself. He leaned over and hugged me, brief and firm, like a promise. He didn't rescue me. He stood beside the truth when it finally spoke. The days after were quieter than I expected. My daughter-in-law didn't call again. My son did. She needs time, he said. I told her the line she drew stays visible now. That's fair, I said. A week later, he came by alone. He didn't sit right away. She asked if you'd come to dinner next month. I didn't answer immediately. What did you tell her? I told her you're not a placeholder. He said, if she wants you there, it has to be because she respects you. I nodded. Then we'll see. When I did hear from her, the message was brief. I'm sorry for how I handled things. I was wrong to exclude you. No explanations. No conditions. I replied just as briefly. Thank you for saying that. Respect matters to me. That was enough. I didn't suddenly become closer to her. We didn't rewrite history. What changed was smaller and stronger. I stopped adjusting myself to fit rooms that had already decided my value. Here's the lesson I carried forward. Not as advice, but as truth learned the slow way dignity doesn't need witnesses. You don't have to announce your worth for it to exist. When you stop negotiating your place, the people who matter notice. The rest fall quiet. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it, share it, or leave a comment about where you're watching from. Stories like this live longer when they're heard together. As for me, I kept my peace. I kept my voice. I kept the life that didn't require an invitation to be real, and that was more than enough.